Well,
Okay.
this one might be a little rambly, so I'm just gonna start this off in the first 30 seconds of this podcast to say we are gonna talk about a topic that was inspired by a TikTok reel, TikTok post, whatever they're called on TikTok, video, whatever. I want to kick it off by saying that because I think this one will get a little rambly. We're not going to talk structure. We are going to talk life. We are going to talk Enneagram, but we're not going to talk constructs or structure within the Enneagram system today. So just being super upfront. So if that makes you like click this off, okay. But we hope you stick around.
Called a TikTok? I
Maybe
think
they'll
it's
call it
called a
TikTok.
TikTok.
A TikTok? Yeah, you're right.
I don't know what the kids are calling it these days.
We do have a TikTok account. I guess they're just called TikToks. They're videos. Short form, they're short form videos,
Yeah, I
technically.
saw a video on TikTok. Yeah, because it's not a reel, because a reel is on Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah, I'll Google it. Don't worry. I know the
Tana's gonna
five
find.
wants to know this information. And for all of you millennials and elder millennials listening, hold on. We're going to
Well,
teach you something
we're
today.
gonna. If there's a difference,
What
I was
is a
uh
video
I was watching
on?
a Noah Khan thing earlier where he was talking about being on Twitter and how he refuses to ever call it X ever. There are just some things, right, that are just like
TikToks.
they are. So you watch
They are
TikTok
TikToks.
on
Yes.
TikTok. Okay. All right, fine.
Okay, this is what they're not called. Okay, this is the AI overview. They're called TikToks, TikTok videos, or short form videos. They're not short form videos. Please don't ever call them that. If you like,
I mean, but technically that's what they are.
I mean, sure.
Technically that's also what reels are. Reels are also short form
Sure.
video. Yes, technically.
And wine is technically grape juice. So,
Okay, before we get into any of the reasons why Tana is drinking wine on this podcast, I'm just going to introduce it in case you're new here. And if you're new here and you made it through that rambling intro, like, thank you so much for sticking around. But this is Enneagram Adventure. It's Tana and I's podcast where we talk about all things with a flavor of the Enneagram, lots of life, lots of growth. I recently heard somebody talk about we're all here just to human better, and I was like, "Oh, I love that." So, we're here for that too. We're here to like help you human better. Anything
yep.
you want to add?
Just my disclaimer around the Enneagram is not meant to put you in a box. It is also meant to go several layers deeper than a traditional personality assessment. So if you are interested in knowing, maybe you know what number you are, or you took a free assessment, or you want to understand a few more of your constructs that we talk about, like tri-type or conflict style, um, feel free to hit us up. We can help you get an assessment link. Otherwise, it's meant to measure core motivation rather than your behavior. So that's what I mean by several layers deeper. But yeah, that's all I would add.
All right, cool. So, back to the TikTok that's inspiring tonight's topic. If you're familiar with a comedian named Alok, you may have seen this, but they are a creator, activist, comedian. You can find them on Instagram as well as TikTok. I would assume also YouTube, but I haven't honestly looked for them there. And they bring this sort of funny yet very real life lens to humanness. This particular TikTok is kicked off with the question of what is your hope for the future? And they kind of launch into their hope for the future is for a world where no one is a stranger. And it goes on to like a few other things, but as we were talking about this, we were just talking about how much we love this, some of the things that they bring up in the video. So one of them, right, was the, where you're walking down the street and somebody says, "How are you?" And you say, "Falling apart." And they say, "Girl, me too." And then all of a sudden you're processing your grief together and you're doing all of these things together. And this sort of idea of we're more the same than we are different. And so I think we can try to talk about how these Enneagram numbers are are the same versus how they're different, if that makes sense. Is there anything you would add to how you want to talk about it?
No, I think that's a great way to think about it. And also through the guise of like, we are all just trying to human better. And to the earliest point of like, the Enneagram is not meant to put you in a box. Uh, Something that you can relate to with every number or an experience, even like at the end of the day, we are all human beings outside of our number. The goal being to better understand yourself and others to be more well-rounded.
We talk about it on here all the time, but assume positive intent and blah blah blah. And there is a little bit of that, right? If you have compassion for someone else, you can see yourself in them. You can see where you're the same versus where you're different. It's also going to make it a lot easier to assume positive intent.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So, in that TikTok, uh, one of the jokes they kind of make is that as you get to know more people and you talk with them and you process like the human experience, you learn that everyone has a different flavor of the same trauma. And the joke is something about it being like Baskin Robbins, like 32 flavors of
Yeah.
of the same thing or something like that. I can't quote it exactly right. I will try to remember to link that video up in the show notes of this so that anybody can go and see it. But yeah, I was just thinking about that. So all of the, all 9 types, the motivations are born from, the ideas around childhood reward or punishment or trauma or some sort, right? It was either how you got rewarded, how you got loved, or how you got punished that really drove your type inside your family. And at the core, we all end up like picking up kind of these different motivations and we're like, "Oh, this is what works in my family, so I'm going to do this." But it still comes from the same basic places in every type.
Yeah, it comes from the same basic places, and it's a little bit of I'm very curious about circumstances and like how people picked up on what works and what doesn't. Like, what did that trial and error look like for each person, and what kind of trauma did that create for each individual person? But I think at the end of the day, it's just worth remembering that, and you say this all the time, like, we're just damaged, like, children walking around that have all of our own baggage, regardless of what time in your life that it showed up. You could have had like the most sunshine and roses childhood, right? But maybe something happened to you as an adult that takes up that trauma space in your life. And I think it's just worth noting that I think even like as funny and engaging as that TikTok is, it is truly about like setting your judgment aside for other people and holding space. And if we can, as human beings, be really intentional about holding space, it's not sacrificing yourself. It's just like honoring what that person went through.
For sure. And I think as we get older and we sort of get ingrained into our patterns, then you have the ego that gets in the way. And it's the ego that tells you things like, "I'm different from everyone else. Nobody could possibly understand me." yes, this person had XYZ situation, but it's nothing like my situation. So therefore, that sort of stuff. And that's all the ego showing up. And on the unhealthy side of every type is ego.
I was just looking up the difference between empathy and compassion. Because in my two brain, right, there's a difference between empathy and compassion. One being you're trying to fix it, and another being you're just able to relate and understand and hold space. I will say through just necessity based off of the work that I do throughout the day with people, but also through the work with Brandon, it is easier for me to distinguish what feelings are mine to fix and which ones are not. It is much harder to do that with my family than it is anybody else.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah. You're closest to them. It's maybe a little harder to separate the same way.
Yep. And I am getting a bit better about it with the kids from the standpoint of, and I'm sure even people who don't have kids, like I feel like you have these people in your life that you just have this urge to help them or fix it for them or offer solution. And with them, I'm kind of putting it through the lens of their adversity is not going to be the same as my adversity. And the work that I've done with Brandon is Brandon always talks about how that's like it gives you gifts at the end of the day. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that there were plenty of moments where it maybe felt unfair or, um, you know, any of the other adjectives that you could use to describe trauma, right? But it's the difference between how can we, to the point of the TikTok and the reel, make it so nobody's a stranger in that we can have empathy for the situation without trying to fix it. So, fellow twos who are listening, like, I challenge you to think with that lens. It's a little bit four energy, where it's like, how do you hold space for?
Yeah. It's something the fours have in spades compared to other numbers is the ability to sit in the discomfort and
Really.
have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that you said before, right, is like even if you had a amazing childhood, maybe there was an adulthood trauma that you're carrying around. Yes, still true. But one of the things I will say about childhood is you could have, and to the point of like, with your kids and what's hard for them, you could have amazing parents and like an amazing family life. But maybe you got a crappy coach for some sport or a teacher that was just like super hard on you for one reason or another, or a church situation. And that one of the things that could have shaped sort of the scenario of how your type came to be could have been not even directly related to your parents. It could have been some other environment that you were a part of, an uncle or a aunt or a older
Cousin
cousin
or,
or
yeah.
yeah.
It it makes me genuinely wonder about, you know, because the people that I run into every day, it feels like it's not human nature to share these things either. To the point of being vulnerable and opening up and sharing the things that, were hard or are challenging. And I think about the eights, the sevens, like the threes of the world that find vulnerability to be extremely hard. It makes me like pine for this, like that future state that's again, back to the original TikTok of what would happen if you were just safe enough to walk down the street. Somebody's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And you're like, "Dumpster fire." You?
We're all so conditioned to hide the painful things and to not share them because they're not quote unquote normal. And we want to come off as strong or we want to come off as competent, right? If you think about each type's motivation, we want to come off as good, helpful, fun, peaceful, whatever that motivation is. And so we cover it up
Easy. Yeah.
easy and we say things like, oh, I'm fine when we're not fine. And I've been thinking about it a lot since the car accident. And, several episodes ago, I unpacked the whole thing. So if you want the whole story, you can go back and listen to it. But having a concussion now and whiplash has also made me like very aware of injuries that are unseen. To the rest of the world, I look perfectly fine. And there are things related to mental health or something like grief or all like different things like that that everyone is carrying around that you cannot see. And I've just thought a lot about that as I'm like navigating concussion symptoms. And I kind of try to make a joke out of it, like I'll joke about it or whatever. But I seriously like am, mixing up letters and can't spell things and like there are other things like going on and it's very unnerving at times. But how do you like just talk about how do you just talk about that stuff? Because there's also this perception that it's because it's not visible, it must not be real. Do you know what I mean?
1,000%. There's probably also a little bit of science behind that, right? Where, as humans, you try to hide weakness or illness or injury or to appear as if you're fine.
Yeah, only the
Um,
strong survive kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Evolution. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm convinced that Bentley was hiding how sick he was from us. And for those of you who don't know, that's my dog that passed away. I think there's real science behind why that happens, and it has to do with all of the things that are just part of our brains. To hide weakness, hide illness, be strong.
If if we think about all the things like we want or we hope for, for the future, it is a little bit fighting against those sort of evolutionary things, though.
Mhm.
I think that makes it harder.
Mhm.
I'd love to say, like, well, I think some of it's, generational, yada, yada. But when I think about, I mean, my parents, my mom in particular, who was very, very much a hippie, she would have talked about her version of wanting those sorts of things for the future. It's maybe not to the same extent as we see it today. Like, I think we've pushed the envelope further than that generation did in the 60s. But the basic principles, I think, are pretty similar.
I think they are too. And it to your point about it being it's you're challenging biology. There's a reason why this work is hard. You're trying to reverse engineer like what is human nature, to have an ego, to
Yeah.
have these forms of protection, psychological, physical, however you want to describe it. We have to keep pushing that in order for us to be able to get to this point where we're more understanding and able to hold space. The work that you and I do, like day in and day out, we see it like the more prevalent that the ego is, and the more that it is controlling the situation, the harder it is to solve.
And the more people lock into those things. It's funny, I was talking with, she's a 3. I was talking with a 3 earlier this week, whenever it was. And she was talking about this sort of feeling, this sort of shift within her team. She feels like it's getting better and things are getting better, but there's still this sort of stuff bubbling under the surface that's like not quite there yet. And she described it as it's like everyone knows it's better, but then they would have to say it's better or admit to themselves it's better. And that does, and then they feel like they're invalidating themselves and they don't want to be wrong. And so do we keep stirring the pot of it's not actually better? We're waiting for the other shoe to drop, blah, 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 that kind of thing, because we don't want to prove ourselves wrong from how we felt before. I thought that was super interesting, right? Is that one of the kind of things that has to go when you're working on an ego death is that rigidity of you gotta allow yourself to be wrong. And it's okay. Like it doesn't mean anything about you. You have to be
Yeah.
allowed, you need to be able to change your mind. I do think there are numbers that can be a little more mentally flexible than others, but an example of that I have with my stepdad, who's a 1, and I remember him telling this story about whatever, something he was working on, and he'd done all this work and this research, and everything was like pointing in this certain direction, and the people he was trying to like influence to get on board with this were just not getting on board. Something like, I don't know, 3-4 years later, he's doing a different job, but he runs into some people that are still working in the same field, and they're talking, and this person who was like against him at that time and would like just would not give in and would not be influenced had changed their mind and was like on board with this thing now down the road. And he was like angry about it. Like, why wouldn't they have just like, I was right. See, I was right. All those years ago, I was right. And he was like
My
locked into it
gosh.
instead of this like allowing for like, well, they just needed to come to it on their own time and be allowed to change their mind. At least they changed their mind. They could have stayed locked in on the thing, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They got there.
Well, I think I know the 3 that you're referencing, and this ability to kind of challenge, uh, and to your point about being right and wrong, right? What's so bad about it? Like, what is so bad about it? What's the worst thing that could happen? And 6s, I'm talking to you, I guess. Like, you can run a whole list of like, what's the worst that can happen in that situation if you're wrong? But how do you get to this point of enough self-confidence and safety within yourself to be wrong?
Yeah. I think that's the key point. Like that's the key work is like if you fully are able to trust yourself, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong because like you'll figure it out. It'll be fine. No one's going to die.
Right.
And for the vast majority of us, we do not work jobs. I say the vast majority of us. I don't really know the percentages, but most people are not doctors or nurses. There are a few, but just
Yep.
trying to speak in generalities. Like, no one's going to die today if you're wrong. And trying to take the pressure off of it. It's funny. That was a little bit about what I talked to Brandon about today, right? Is like, it was a lot, not about being right and wrong, but the idea of like removing the pressure. Like, it doesn't have to be so serious.
Hmm.
So,
Well, also the flexibility to be wrong I mean, also requires you to have some curiosity about what is right and being able to separate yourself enough from your ego to be able to ask that question is important, because if I think of us, just trying to human better at the end of the day, to try to human better also means that you're willing to accept that you might be wrong,
Yeah.
or there's a different perspective. Or so if we're out there being the best that we can be every day, or the 1% better every day, in my mind, the 1% better every day is, how do you be able to get, more trusting in yourself and more trusting in, you're living your truest form of yourself without having to be right.
Yeah. I like that. I also think of it a little bit as how do you get closer and closer to neutral? Because at neutral there is no judgment. And so if you could get 1% closer to neutral every day, like what a different life you would get to live.
There's a lot of work in that, but there's also so much freedom.
The people who are truly neutral are the safest people though, right? That's the people you can go to, you can say anything to. They won't judge you for it. They won't I was going to say they won't try to fix it. Sometimes they'll still try to fix it, but there isn't any shame or anything like that attached to it when someone is in a
Right.
yeah.
Right. My husband and I just had this conversation a few weeks ago. We were sitting on the couch, and one of my favorite things to do with him at the end of an evening, this is totally unrelated, is to ask him like the most random questions that are like often so incredibly not deep, or like way too deep.
Yeah.
It's like the very end of the night. And like on the not deep side, when we had Bentley, I'd be like, if Bentley played a sport, what do you think he'd be like so good at?
What was the answer?
He always said like golf. I don't, I don't know.
For those of you that don't know, Bentley was a puggle. So,
Yeah.
a golf playing puggle.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
He gave more like tennis vibes for me, but that's just me. But on the other end of the spectrum, I asked him, so for those of you who don't know, my husband is an 8. He is a first responder. I uh asked him, I was like, if money was no object and you knew you were gonna make all the money that you could ever want in the world, what's the profession that you would pick? He said, a teacher. And it's an interesting question to think about for yourself, because it gives you the feeling of, in the way that he described it to me, is the fun aspect of it. Like, he loves kids, he loves like young people, and because he's also a grown adult child. But I should flash this picture up at this point. I am not kidding you guys, had all of our neighborhood kids up on our roof 2 weeks ago. Like, they had been throwing a ball between the second floor and the front lawn. And then, like, they all came upstairs and he had them all, like, sitting on the first tier of our roof. Like, he is such a child. But it's a little bit the question. He put it through the lens of, I could actually do something that matters, that feels like it makes an impact in a way that's proactive rather than reactive.
Because everything today that he does is reactive.
It feels
That
like a
makes sense.
punishment.
Yeah.
It feels like, in the dialogue we had after the fact was, that's so funny because it's like when the kids are at their totally different, but when the kids are at their worst and I come home and I'm like harping on them all night long, it's the worst.
Right.
I want to be able to have fun with you. I want to be able to laugh with you. But like if you're being a little jerk, then I have to like be a disciplinarian, and I don't like that. So if you think about like one lens you might, if like you're just starting to think about this concept of understanding and impact and all of these other people that are experiencing things around you, like what would you do if it was no object? Like money was no object. What would you do with your time?
Are you asking, or is this a hypothetical for our audience?
Both. Both. I'm curious.
For me, I would, if money was no object, I would expand what you and I do with this podcast into an actual
Business.
business of some
Yeah.
sort.
Yeah.
So, that would be one direction I would go. And then outside of that, I personally would expand on the, content creation work that I do for a couple other podcasts and things like that. I would just do more of that if I could make a living at that, which I could, we could. It's just that that's going to take a pretty big leap of faith, to be super honest with our whole audience, which includes people that see us at our day jobs. We're not quitting anytime soon. But
No.
like, yeah, if money was no object, yeah, I would expand this differently.
Yeah. I would do the same, and I would want to do some sort of work that supported a marginalized or like unsupported population of some sort. Not necessarily for the goal of like the advocacy, but like if there's something that I could help them with. Like I think the coolest thing that I've seen recently is the Mile in My Shoes thing in Minnesota, where runners partner with other runners who like have something that has, put them at a disadvantage in their life, whether they were, had a disability or had um I think some of them may have been like incarcerated at one point or like something, and they want to better themselves, so they take up running, and you become a mentor for this person and you run with them multiple times a week, and ultimately leading up to a race or like some sort of goal. And I think it's like the coolest thing. So if I could do, not necessarily about the running piece specifically, it was something like that that would give me fulfillment in a way that like fed my soul a little bit. I loved this class in high school. We had a class in high school called Adaptive PE, where your senior year you could partner with the gym class of your peers, your classmates that had disabilities. So
That's
they were
cool.
not part of a regular gym class, they had their own gym class. And oh my gosh, it was my favorite part of my day. Every single day. They were so funny. Like so happy, so like it was just something you got to do to help someone else that was a peer that like genuinely brought me joy. And I won't share his name. He was one of like the peers that I was partnered with, but he would always pretend to smoke cigarettes in school. He would like put his hand up and like pretend like he was flicking a lighter. And I'd, like joke with him and be like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm smoking. I love smoking." then, like, and the teachers were so great, like, that was another thing I loved about it, like, the real adult teachers would, like, play into it with them and be like, "Hey, you can't do that in the hallway." Like, like, you can't do that inside, and he thought it was so funny. Um, but you give them, like, genuine connection with a peer, and you're doing something with them, and you're interacting with them in a way that they don't get day in and day out. They're more so partnered with adults, and it was, like, one of my favorite things that our school district offered. It was so cool.
That is cool. I definitely did not have anything like that. At least that I'm aware of. I
There was a
graduate.
girl in school that actually, like, made up a rumor about, like, one of my best friends was also a peer in the class,
Mhm.
and who she was partnered with, a student, was walking around school saying, "Jenna's pregnant. Jenna's pregnant." Like, it was, like, one of her stems, right?
Yeah.
It's still, like, one of my favorite stories of all time. They just, like, bring you a different perspective. They brought so much joy. They were so happy to see you every day, and money was no object. Something like that.
Yeah. Money only has value because we all agree that it has value, and if we all agreed that it didn't, then it wouldn't.
I love this rabbit hole podcast, by the way. Let's just abolish that system. Let's just
Yeah.
all go back to bartering.
There are things in our society that we've all, like, just for so long that we've agreed to, that I just think, well, we made that up. Somebody
Right.
made that up. It's not real.
Isn't that crazy? Imagine what we could make up that could be real.
Yeah.
It would have to
I
play into status or hierarchy or human psyche in a way that's way
Yeah.
easier than working against ego.
We're on the wrong side of that.
We are.
Yeah.
We're
Um,
moving in the wrong direction as it relates to creating something like that.
okay. Well, in a perfect world, I mean, I think we would look we would look at each other to the point we made earlier, right? Like kinder, more compassionate, without judgment, more neutral. I think about how hard that is. Even if you're like conscious and right, working on getting rid of ego and try like even if you're doing all of that work, you and I talked about it a little bit earlier too, right? Where you're like trying to break these patterns and they're ego patterns and like but that and yet there's like there's so much comfort in the pattern even if it's a bad pattern, even if you know it's a bad pattern. There's like comfort in it. And so you just kind of keep going back to it and even when you're like, nope, I don't need to go back to that, you're still like, but I want to go back to that. And I think some of that's really hard too, because you're just, to your earlier point, we're just fighting against like our own, like, what evolutionary wiring in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know quite where I was going with that because I was going to try to, you know, I had another point, but I
Someday.
kind of got lost.
Well, that's okay because I'm right there with it. When we were talking about it earlier, it was because you guys, I still am out here holding my parents accountable, and I will have had a session with Brandon at the point that this comes out to be able to continue my work there. But this is a helpful step in the right direction of me being more understanding and considering that they did the best with what they could and all of those things. But that's not, I mean, it's hard. It's working against everything that feels like the easiest neural pathway that you've developed.
And sometimes there's to that point in the pattern or in the judgment or in the anger or in the thing, you get like this release in these moments where you like let whatever that is out at another person or about a situation, and then you always feel terrible about it later, right? Like
Yeah.
I got very angry at Aaron on a bike ride over the weekend and like let myself sort of like go to work on him, right? Which was
Yeah.
like not productive. And afterwards I was like, oh, that was too much. You did not need to do that. Right. So like in the moment though, it was like vindicating
Yeah,
or
like
whatever.
cathartic. Like, yeah, like
Yeah.
just like
Yeah,
to
that would
get
it
it off your chest. Yeah.
right. And it had most of it had absolutely nothing to do with him. Yes, there were a few things that were like really like I was like, I really need you to change how you're doing that. But it ultimately what it is just the frustration over the fact that I'm not where I want to be because of this accident and blah 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 blah. Right?
Yeah.
And he just like caught all of that. And so my point is like we also like get these hits and like of like, oh, I'm vindicated. It's validating. I have all this actually feels good in this moment. And it's not actually good. I don't
Yeah, it's like a false high that you get.
yeah.
Like that little dopamine hit of like the, oh, I like said that thing. But then the real dopamine comes after you address like, hey, that wasn't about you. At least for
Right.
me, like this is how it shows up for
Yeah.
me, is when I go back to the person and I say, I've taken some time with this. This wasn't about you. If I'm comfortable sharing, like, here's what it was about, and I'm working on it. If the response of that other person, this is the other work that I have to do, but if the response of that other person is like, I totally get it. Thank you so much for like letting me know. I'm like, great. My two self is like, I've reinforced the relationship. Like, real crooked ass place. But I've reinforced the relationship. Like, it's okay. They're not mad at me.
It's
Where it
fun.
needs to be
It's yeah.
less like they're not mad at me, and it needs to be more of like, I needed to, like, this is true self coming through and me telling you completely raw what's going on so I'm able to address it.
Yeah. It's interesting in terms of that apology for you. So like in this example I gave with Aaron, like I apologized to him and I was like, I'm sorry I was so mean to you on the bike ride. And he says, it's okay. And I was like, but it's and he was like, well, maybe it's better for me to say thank you for saying that. Like,
There you go.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Because I was like, no, it wasn't actually
It's
okay.
not okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna try not to take my frustration with my current circumstances out on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to the point of like, how do we get to a place where it does feel safe to like, because again, if it, if things, not that I don't feel safe with him, I don't want that to come off that way because he'll listen to this and be like, what are you talking about? And then there'll be a whole other thing. That's not what I mean. It's not necessarily like that I'm not safe to express my emotions or how I'm feeling to him. But if we lived in this future state world where it was okay to be like, to answer how are you doing with I'm falling apart. If that was like truly safe, like a whole bunch of this stuff would be these kind of things would be avoided because you wouldn't have that same need, right? To like have the emotion expressed in that way or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you really think about it, we're not even close to that kind of world. And
No.
like, to be perfectly honest, I am also still sometimes very caught off guard when I go up to a barista and I'm like, hey, good morning. How are you? And they're like, it's a terrible day. And I'm like, oh, not expecting that. Don't have time for that. Also, thank you for sharing. Have a nice day. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not there. I'm not there. It's the like what I need to work on is when that happens, being like, oh, so sorry to hear that. I hope it gets
It's
gets
better.
better. And, I've had those days too.
And oat milk latte, please.
Oat milk latte, extra hot. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Don't spit in it.
But I do think, though, back to your question that you ask your husband about, that we talked about, like what we would do if money was no object. If money was no object, those conversations likely you would feel like you had time for.
Well, yeah. I would feel like I have time for it. And listen, I'm a two. I want to fix everybody's problems. Love that. I'd literally just walk the streets and be like, how are you today?
Tell me all
How
about
can I
it.
help you?
Oh, what would happen tomorrow if in mixed company we're like, "How are you?" You're like, "Falling
Actually,
apart."
trash.
Yeah,
I'm trash.
same. Yeah,
It might be a fun social experiment to do one time,
yeah.
like just for a day. Just be really honest about how you're doing. I'm slightly overwhelmed, feeling anxious, and my armpits are sweaty. Yourself?
I know I get crap all the time because every time somebody's like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I'm all right." I always say, "I'm all right." I don't say I'm good. I don't say whatever. I'm all right.
Listen, like we don't
And
have to be over the moon every
like,
time.
yeah, I'm always a little bit to like, I don't know what you want me to say. You want me to like,
She's
I don't.
aloof. She's a 5.
I mean, but I lit like it's the truth. I'm all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not dead yet. Is that a better answer?
Yeah. No,
What
I
is
don't
it?
think
The
that is. No.
no.
Uh,
There's a
if the
is it
goal is to make other people more comfortable, no.
I can't remember which Scandinavian country it is, but they have an a saying that they say to people where it's like um
Oh, like
it
so.
translates well, but it translates to I'm upright and not crying.
Can I get a tattoo of that?
Yeah.
Next tattoo.
I'll have to look that up.
Scandinavian for I am upright.
And not crying. I said that to somebody one time when they were like
How
they're like, "You
funny.
always just say all right." And I was like, "Would you rather I like was like I'm upright and not crying? Was that better?"
That better for you? Does that make you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
I think we should
Well,
just be honest about it.
we should be.
See what happens.
Well, this one was very meandering. I mean, we mentioned the Enneagram a few times. So technically it's still an Enneagram podcast, I guess. But I warned you.
Yeah.
If you made it to the end, I warned you up front that this is what was going to happen. So if you stuck it out to the end, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Maybe the next one will be more organized. Maybe.
Awesome.
No promises.
I have a goal before the next one to get my 90-year-old grandmother to do the assessment.
Oh my goodness. That would be very curious.
So and my mother, trying to
Oh.
find out a generational thing because I know my sister's a 9 and I'm a 2. I need to figure out what those two are.
Mm-hmm. It would be very curious.
So we will see.
My childhood made so much sense when I found out my mother was an 8. I was like, oh my God.
Makes so
This
much
makes
sense.
so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be part of my Mother's Day gift. How hilarious.
I'm giving you this thing that's really for me. But thank you.
I'm going to give you this thing so I can understand my trauma. Thank you, Queen. Happy Mother's Day.
I can't wait to unpack that one.
Oh, yeah. How exciting.
Coming soon for all of you. We find out what the generations of Enneagram types are in Tana's family.
Love that.
Yes. I'm going to call Suzanne Stabile, try to get her on to analyze that for you.
Perfect. That would be actually great.
Yeah.
That's all I want for Mother's Day. You don't have to get me anything else.
Right. I'll get right on that.
All right. Find us on
Okay.
socials, the TikTok, Substack. Don't forget Substack.
Don't forget Substack.
YouTube, Spotify. Yeah, share, like, subscribe, review, all the things.
Comment. All that stuff's super helpful.
And
If
go be
you,
honest about how you're feeling.
yes, go be honest about how you're feeling. Maybe let us know. We would love that.
Maybe not if your armpits are sweaty. You can leave that part out, but
Okay. That's a great note to leave this one on. I'll talk to you later, Jana.
okay, bye.